morning, welcome to another edition of Indycar. My name's Gordon Ross and today I am broadcasting from Annie's Land. Yesterday I made a rather ad hoc broadcast about a new situation which is developing rapidly at Holyrood, and that was that the Scottish Secretary David Mundell has been secretly trying to lure civil servants away from the Holyrood Parliament and to working for him and the British government. Now, he's doing this by offering them inducements, much larger pay packets and higher grades than they would get at Holyrood working for the Scottish government and the Scottish Parliament. Now, this is controversial, not just simply because it's poaching people away, but it's the reason for it is the key thing. Why is Mundell doing this right now? Why does he need over 100 new civil servants in his office, which until recently has only required 5 people? Well, the reason is quite obvious. He's preparing to take power from the Scottish Parliament. He's expecting some kind of move from London which is going to strip Scottish Parliament of its powers and return all the powers to, well, basically centralising them back in London, in which case he's going to become the Viceroy of Scotland. He's going to become our man in Scotland. Basically, he's going to become the ruler of Scotland with his own little kingdom down at the docks in Victoria Dock at Leith. Now, this story itself is not that controversial because it's been known for a long time that Mundell has been up to something, because his expenses suddenly shot up about a year ago as the Scotland office started campaigning actively against the Scottish government. They were doing an awful lot of spin and an awful lot of PR work on behalf of the British government. So naturally Mundell's costs and expenses started to skyrocket. What's interesting about the situation with Mundell is that it's where the money is coming from to pay these civil servants, because it's not coming from us, it's not coming from you and I directly in the Scottish government, but it is coming from funds which would normally be given to overseas development, as far as I understand it. And my sources are usually quite accurate about things like this, but what we're looking at the moment, still trying to find evidence for this, but the word that's coming out is that the money for Mundell's army, his new model army, which is going to take over Scotland after they have removed Holyrood, the funding for that is coming from a budget within Whitehall, which is normally given over to foreign aid. That's the way it looks. Now, I don't have confirmation of these claims. I'm just reporting to you what I've heard. And that is that Mundell is using funds which are normally earmarked for foreign aid to build a little army of civil servants whom he is paying far more than they would get at Holyrood Parliament, and he's enticing them away with the promise of more money. Basically, it's being bought for English gold in the true sense of the word. It's just about as bad as it could be, and it's taking a leaf out of the British book in 1707. In other news today, if those of you who ever watch the BBC these days, and there can't be that many of us left who do, but I watch it occasionally just to see what they're up to. This morning's broadcast on the National Health Service, children's health services, particularly in Scotland, seemed to be telling us that children's health in Scotland had fallen behind our peers on the continent. Now, the interesting thing about this was that no statistics were presented to provide evidence for this. No people were shown who could tell you anything about where we were comparing the Scottish child health to. What other benchmarks were they using? Not only that, but the man, the paediatric specialist who was interviewed, was an Englishman, and he was sitting in front of a hospital, the name of which was obscured, so that we couldn't tell where he came from. We didn't know which hospital he was with, and he made some vague, airy-fairy claims that Scotland was falling behind its competitors in child health care, with no evidence to back up these claims. And then we immediately cut back to London, and Salford, cut back to the Salford studio for the morning Good Morning programme, and they were talking about how English children's health had fallen behind that of Scotland and Wales. So you can see where the thinking is going here. Scotland's falling behind Europe with absolutely no evidence to back up that claim, but now we know that the statistics in the United Kingdom actually show that the English NHS services for children have fallen behind those of Scotland and Wales. Now that's what this is really about. It's about trying to make Scotland look as bad, or at least a bit bad, because of the English poor results for child health care. It's a subtle but insidious thing. They do it every single day. England's bad, so Scotland must be bad as well, and it just is getting a bit wearisome. So that was something else that appeared in the news today, and I thought you might like to maybe just know about it. You probably watch these things anyway. I've said a few other things in the beginning of this show in writing, but one of the things I wanted to touch on, because I've been talking about blockchain a lot recently, and many people have come on to try and criticise blockchain and say that it's hackable. It's not hackable. You could only hack in to somebody's computer to steal a key. Now that is a code word or a code number or a password which enables you to get into, say, a Bitcoin wallet. Now that would have to belong to an individual. And so this hackability thing is nonsense. That's only happened with people who are using Bitcoin. It doesn't happen with the voting system. A voting system is much simpler, and it's what I call a single transaction blockchain. You make your vote. Having registered, you make your vote, and that's recorded on the blockchain ledger, and it's there all the way through, and you can see it there. It never goes away. If anybody tries to tamper with it, the system will reject it, because it's not you who's doing it, and the system can tell it's not you who's doing it very simply because the information that you must give to the system in order to make any alterations is personal to you, and there's no way anybody in the civil service, in the Secret Service or anywhere else would know the personal information that you know in your memory of your lifetime and what that information is that you're using as your keyword, if you like, or keywords. So it's a very simple system. Interestingly, there are other options. Blockchain's not the only one. It's just the most modern and the quickest and most effective and most tamper-proof. There are other methods that have been proposed, and one of those I proposed a long time ago, still could work, is to have the counts in the actual polling stations. So in other words, if you must use this ancient 200-year-old voting system with pencil on paper, then you should count the votes out of the ballot box as soon as the poll ends. There should be tipped out, and witnesses from both sides in the debate should be there to watch the count take place. And when the tally is agreed, and all sides have agreed, then that should be phoned through to a grand totaliser on live TV. Now there's absolutely no way that that could be tampered with, but it means you have to get rid of postal votes, because postal votes are still the most vulnerable to tampering that there is. Judges have said this, countless articles have been written on it. There's been evidence of vote tampering in just about every single postal vote that's ever been held in the UK. So, blockchain, yes, it's the bee's knees, it's the Rolls Royce of voting systems, and it's what we really want. But if we don't have time, or the government hasn't got the money to do that in time, then having the counts in the polling stations is a decent second option. It's another way of ensuring that the votes are counted where they're cast, so they can't be transported away in anonymous vans with single people where nobody knows where they go next and what happens to them, and where the seals themselves are just simply a ziplock. Now that last time there was no real security on the election boxes, on the voting boxes last time, and so nobody knew what happened to them. The seals could have been forced quite easily by just putting another ziplock on them, and it was very easy to switch boxes or to stuff extra no votes into them. It would have been so easy to change the voting outcome in that type of election. So what I would say to you is, yeah, there are other options to blockchain, but the main one is having the counts in the polling stations. Anyway, that's about all I've got time for today. There is a little bit more news in the blurb at the beginning of this show, but I haven't got the time to do much more on it. But various people from, shall we say, the British nationalist side, and there's a very small minority of them among the over 30,000 people who viewed yesterday's post, have been complaining that I'm in the left-hand drive car. Well, actually, no, I'm just using a selfie camera on the phone, which absolutely reverses things to a mirror image. Otherwise, people wouldn't be able to line up their selfies. I'm actually in a right-hand drive car, so nothing suspicious there. And for those of those British nationalists who think that I'm creating fake news, well, these facts that I am telling you can be verified. Mundell's office will probably confirm that they've been hiring more staff. They can't really hide it because they have to pay tax to these people. He won't tell you why he's doing it, but you will find out eventually, if you dig deep enough, that the funds for the payment of these people is not coming from Scotland. It's not coming from the actual Scottish government, and it's not coming from the Parliament. It's not coming from their pay from their pay package. It's coming from London. Direct rule, direct payment, direct bribery to these civil servants who's supposed to be, remember, supposed to be impartial and supposed to be able to do their jobs without being swayed one way or the other. And yet they're being enticed away from the civil service in Scotland. Now that can only be bad for Scottish civil servants anyway, because they're robbing the Scottish Parliament of perfectly good workers and taking them away to work in another clandestine operation down at Victoria Quay. Anyway, I'm off now. I will speak to you all tomorrow. As usual, if you have any suggestions or any news feeds for me, make them in the usual way after the show. The best way to contact me is usually on Messenger, which is more secure than making comments on the show itself. And I always respect people's confidentiality, and I'll check the sources as well. Anyway, I have to go now, but look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Keep your powder dry, and don't forget, Mundell is at it, and the BBC is at it as well, again, as usual, with its NHS bad in Scotland. Oh, one last thing, I think I mentioned in the blurb, that Boris Johnson is going against Tory policy and demanding £100 million a week be given to the NHS in England, but not to make the NHS work better, but to prevent Jeremy Corbyn from winning the next general election, which Boris believes he will do by funding the NHS properly. So as usual, the Tories don't give a toss about how healthy you are or whether the NHS is in good form or not, so long as they win the next election, because that's why Boris is asking for the money. Okay, see you later. Bye for now. Talk to you tomorrow.